Your attention, masters, mistresses. All systems functional for the Everything Geek podcast.
Hey, this is Rich McDonald, and I play Commander David Mason on Call of Duty Black Ops 2. And you're listening to Everything Geek podcast.
It's James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Master Plo Koon in Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Everything Geek, the podcast.
Hey, it's Leif Gamfert. I played Uncle Ben's killer in The Amazing Spider-Man, and you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast.
Hello, I'm Simon Fisherbecker. You probably know me better as Dorian Moldovar from Doctor Who, or the Fat Friar from Harry Potter. And this is Everything Geek podcast.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot with the Everything Geek podcast.
You're listening to the Everything Geek podcast, bringing you interviews from your favorite films and TV shows every week, and all of the latest news. Here's your host, Rory Williamson.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast. I'm your host Rory, and joining me is co-host Ashleigh.
Hello.
And also joining us today is a very special guest. We have actor Tom Skerritt, best known for playing Dallas in Alien, Viper in Top Gun, David Drumlin in Contact, Duke Forrest in M.A.S.H, Sheriff Jimmy Brock in Picket Fences, Sheriff Bannerman in The Dead Zone, Reverend Maclean in A River Runs Through It, Captain Bill Rhodes in Tears of the Sun, William Walker in Brothers and Sisters, Evan Drake in Cheers, and the voice of Clay Allison in Gun. He also voiced Dallas for Alien Isolation and played himself in Ted. How are you today, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well and doing what I really want to do, which is right. So
that's great. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. So getting right into my questions for you, Tom, for some of our listeners that may not be familiar with your background, can you tell us how you got into acting?
Well, real quick, I was an English major at UCLA, and I had seen an elective class, film class, and my film was Citizen Kane, and I was so impressed with that. I said, I want to do that. I want to direct that. But I felt that I was going to do either write or direct. I had to know what it was to act by doing it. So I happened to be seeing acting, and a couple of guys asked me to be in a little $1.98 movie, which had 3 or 4 other actors, and one was Robert Redford, another was Sidney Pollack before he became a director, and that's where their relationship started, and that's where my relationship with Redford started. And at the same time, I met a director who lived in a neighborhood near UCLA, had a conversation. He invites me over to watch him direct a TV show, and I'm thinking, he's a very interesting guy. I think I'm going to mentor with this guy on directing and filmmaking. So I mentored with that man. And a few years later, he gave me a call one day, and he said, hey, I'm going to be directing. I've been hired to do a movie, and I'd love to have you act in it. And I thought, well, that'd be a great way to learn all of this stuff. It's about learning how to direct, learning how to control the crew and cast, and because a large part of directing is how you deal with your people effectively. And anyway, the film he was going to direct was something called M.A.S.H, which I don't think you mentioned. And M.A.S.H was that was the one that got me going.
Absolutely. Can you tell us how you were originally cast as Dallas in Alien?
I received a script that was all I knew was I was the first one that came out to. There was no director. There was a $2 million budget on it, as I understood it. And I read it, and I said, I was working quite a bit in those days. And I looked at it, I said, well, this is really not an actor's script. It's really more about these devices and so on and so forth. And $2 million really would not make a very particularly good film. and it would be more like an Ed Wood movie with, robot rockets on strings being held from the ceiling, and no director. That was it. Just $2 million, and I turned it down. It happened that I had seen a film prior to reading this script, which is a script called Alien, and I had I'd seen a movie that I loved. It was knocked out about when I saw it by Ridley Scott. It was his first movie, and it was called The Duelists. And it was a masterpiece in the efficiency of production and cost and all of that. And I was quite moved by it. So 3 weeks later, it happened, coincidentally. I get a call back from the producer. They said, well, it's going to be a $10 million budget film, and Ridley Scott is going to direct it. And I said, let's go. So the difference was that we could make a really quality film with a quality director instead of the uncertainty of making a $2 million film that really needed more to it than what I had read. So that's how it happened.
It's very interesting. It's really exciting that, you'd seen that other Ridley Scott film and then you enjoyed it immensely, and that ended up kind of in a way being how you decided to take on the role, because you were so impressed by Ridley Scott's storytelling in the other film.
Oh yeah, no question. You're going to be working with a great filmmaker, and that's primarily where we all succeed. Is if you have a solid screenplay and you have a director the caliber that I've been able to work with Hal Ashby and Robert Altman and Ridley Scott and Tony Scott and several others, when you have that, chances are you're going to have a good film. It's what the screenplay is what inspires all of us. And if it inspires the director, he's going to take it to another, he or she will take it to another level, and the actors, given that sense of inspiration, will themselves take it again to another level. So it becomes sometimes more than a studio can handle or quite understand, because it's not. It's the pleasure of being able to take the inspiration that the writer has put into the material that they may not even know they've put into it until an objective reader reads the screenplay, if you're following me. It's all about how you look objectively at the material. And that's what I've been led by every time I read a screenplay, is how good is the story? How does it advance into this wonderful thing that touches people in the audience in a way that they can walk out of that theater and say, that was 2 hours worth my time.
That's fine, but that's a really great explanation. It's all about how interesting the story is, how well developed the characters are. That really defines how worth 2 hours of someone's time it is. So I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Well, they're the heart of it. If you don't have a good screenplay, it doesn't have to be a great screenplay, just a solid piece of storytelling. And it's what the director takes out of it, and then the cast that he pulls together that is in itself, by extension, inspired on another level. So it progresses. It's sort of like diving off a really good diving board in the pool. The weaker the diving board is, you just don't get a good dive. But if it's a strong, good board, you jump up in the air and you twirl around, come down, make a clean dive into the water. That's I don't know why I come up with that comparison, but it's that. It's the story. It's the script. It's always that. It starts everything. I don't know why people think otherwise.
For the record, I thought that was a really great comparison.
Yeah. Well, it's very graphic, and I think a lot of this stuff has to be put in metaphors. Many things we talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have any idea when you worked on Alien that it would become so popular to this day?
Well, the popularity, and you can't imagine what it's going to be, but I knew I was in a classic the way this is evolving with that cast, and when I got the call, but thankfully I did get the call back from the producer telling me it really was going to be doing this thing, and then they put this wonderful cast together, a couple of wonderful English actors, Ian Holm and John Hurt, and the rest of them, Sigourney joined board, and I wasn't familiar with Sigourney. She was a wonderful stage actor they found in New York that they brought into it, and she was just a gift. I knew Yaphet, and I knew the rest of the guys that were in the film. So all of that, and given the way that Ridley worked, I knew I had already had this mentorship with Robert Altman and Hal Ashby back in the early 70s prior to Alien, so I knew what these I knew the capability and appreciated the capability of Ridley Scott coming into that. So I thought, I'm in something special even before we started shooting it. So it just, as we went along, you realized you were doing something, as I did with M.A.S.H, by the way. You realize something special here, something that's going to make a difference in how people approach making films and how audiences respond to them. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was a really great answer. Which scene would you say was the most challenging for you to shoot on Alien?
What scene was the most challenging? Well, probably the one where I have to walk around, where Dallas has to walk around through the air conditioning vents, those big caves. That was somewhat awkward, but in terms of physically. Otherwise, I was following Ridley around most of the time, watching how he was shooting. He would teach me why he's doing little fine-tooth combing with props, for example, so he get texture, so you get more in the frame of a picture. So for me, I was a student walking with a master, and that's really what that's how I saw it.
Yeah.
So any individual scene was not really what it was about. It was really about what I could gain from somebody of that caliber.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And the scene you brought up as well, I have to say I was rewatching the film to prepare for this interview. You can tell how much of a fan I am. But I was like rewatching that scene as well, the scene you mentioned, and like I was just thinking to myself when watching it, yeah, that must be pretty uncomfortable to walk through the air conditioning like that. So I'm not surprised you brought that up as being a bit challenging, walking like that for a few minutes.
Yeah, it gets a little warm in there, and very cramped, and we spent a few hours doing it, so that was about as kind of uncomfortable, but as I got, and that wasn't much, it was all worth everything that one does with you when you're working with a director of the caliber of Ridley Scott. It's a reward. You're learning something all the time, and you are contributing something as a result. It becomes a give and take situation. We give him the best we have, and he takes the best we give him.
Definitely. Would you say that was your favorite memories from your time working on Alien, shadowing Ridley Scott and seeing how he did things like that?
Oh, absolutely. For me, anyway. I don't know how other actors respond or what their approach to all of this is. All I know is the life I've been living. And as far as there were specific things that I recall, one thing in particular that I will share with you that I wish I had had a camera to photograph. iPhones were not in existence then. So I came to work one day after about the time that the set was broken for lunch. So the big doors of the studio, the auditorium, the sound stage, opened up, and out came the alien in his outfit, minus the head, wearing bright blue tennis shoes. And he was a 7'1" Nigerian aeronautical engineer, as I understand, who was somebody's friend and came in just to walk in that outfit, which looked great on him. So he's talking with, he's 7'1", and he's talking with the wardrobe mistress, who's about 5 feet tall. And they're having a talk about economics or something as they're coming out of the door. And the tail's being carried by a wardrobe person who's got a white silk scarf on that's flying in the breeze. And the image, the photo of that was one of the most unforgettable visuals I've ever had in all the filmmaking I've been doing. Is that really incongruous photo of this look of the alien monster's tail being carried by this gentleman with the white ascot flying in the wind, and the alien wearing bright blue tennis shoes, discussing politics or economics with the 5-foot wardrobe mistress. Is that a great image?
It certainly is.
That's the best image.
I love that. Well, I mean, those are the things that I take away, the funny things, the incongruities of all of this, of my whole life, for that matter. I'm a lucky man. Lucky man.
Definitely, but that's such a fascinating story. Like, I mean, it's for me now, it's kind of hard to take the alien as seriously, because now I'll be thinking about economics and tennis shoes.
Yeah, bright, and they were so bright blue, you know, and it's just, the whole picture of that was, yeah, I wish I had that on film.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd make a lot of money selling that one.
You definitely would.
But it gives you some idea of how I see all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. But that is such a fascinating, memorable memory. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Now, I know you attend a number of Comic-Cons and meet a lot of fans of your work, including Alien, Top Gun, Contact, and more. I also know that next month's London Film and Comic-Con will be the last Comic-Con you do in the UK. What is it like meeting fans of your work?
Well, the fans are also, they're always, they make me humble, and I'm very appreciative of the sincerity and the authenticity of the fans, who are always so complimentary and don't ask for much, and just a signed photograph, and it's always rewarding just being aware of the people out there that have an appreciation for the work you do.
Definitely, the fans are really great, that's for sure. Now, I know that you head a school of screenwriting called the Film School, in which you are also an instructor. How important do you think it is that people in the industry like yourself teach the next generation about the industry?
Well, as I pointed out earlier, I was an English major, so I was a writer early on, and that who wanted to become a director, and if I was going to be a director, I had to know what it was to act. So I do highly recommend, and it's part of the thing that we teach at this storytelling school that we have here, which is called the Film School, which is somewhat misleading because it's really, the focus is on storytelling, how to tell a story well, and how to do that in film. Things are changing right now, so obviously we have to consider the web and the internet and new media distribution. So we're bringing that element into the storytelling school as well. How to do web series, how to realign your thinking about the movie business. I mean, film is an old-fashioned expression, oddly enough, and it's really about visual entertainment. And in the school, we emphasize it's not enough to be just an actor or a director or a writer. You have to know all three of them. That's what the experience was that I've had, is I've learned constantly one thing or another by being in the element of great people that I've worked with. But I've learned from all of them about it informs the writing, it informs the directing, and it informs the acting, and it also gives you a perspective that keeps you from being too precious of your own whatever you're doing, whatever you're there for, too precious as an actor, too precious as a director, too precious as a writer. But they inform one another. And that's really what we emphasize at the school, is do all of these things together. Write and act and direct while you're here. So you have some sensory thing about this rather than intellectualizing all this stuff. Art is not of any kind, and I'm a painter as well. Art is not an intellectual exercise. You either feel it or you don't. And that's the long and short of it all.
That's really fascinating, and I really like that at the school you do teach about all different areas of the industry. It's not just about the storytelling, it's not just about the acting. As you said, you teach them to be directors as well, and that they have to be all of them. As you said, they have to know at least a little bit out of everything, including acting, directing and writing, and I think that's a really good approach. They need to know at least a little bit of all of it.
Yes, they do. And it informs our impulses. And we always seem to want to put things on a shelf of how to do this, how to do that. You just do them. You just do them. And it takes care of itself. You inform your imagination, which informs your instincts, which drives your impulses to be creative. Any analysis of that is inappropriate. I think Shakespeare once said, "There is no right or wrong or bad or good, only thinking makes it so."
Mm-hmm.
That's a really great quote.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, my final question for you, Tom, do you have any upcoming acting roles or any other projects that you would like to talk about?
I'm starting a company here called Hey You Media, and it's a new media visual and producer of visual entertainment content, doing web series. We're getting writers together to develop material specifically for new media distribution. Quality would be theatrical, but I think we have to consider budgets that can accommodate new media costs. New media does not require big budget, 9-digit budget films. They can't make money that way, but they can make money if they're capped at a certain level. And so we're trying to develop material to release to new media, iPhones, iPads, that sort of thing, that are entertaining, short films, and variety of animated projects, that sort of thing. So that's really where my focus is right now. apart from writing another screenplay and finishing a paper on the imagination, to how we have not really, we're not really using our imagination in the most effective way. And that's a concern I think we should all have.
Definitely. Well, I wish you all of the best of luck with your upcoming projects. I mean, they both sound really fascinating, the screenplay and the new organization, so I wish you the best of luck with both of those. That's all of my questions for you, Tom. Thanks for answering them, and I'll let Ashleigh ask her questions now.
Mr. Skerritt, it really is a pleasure to have you on our podcast today, and I really appreciate you going in depth on your acting career as a whole. And my first question for you today is, with your involvement in television and film spanning well over 40 years, did you ever imagine you would have such a prolific acting career?
Oh, God, no. I was a blue-collar kid in Detroit, Michigan, living in a neighborhood of primarily auto industry workers. And that's not a very particularly inspiring place to be. I had the good fortune of having a public school education system that endorsed or did fund, they were able to fund taking a bus ride to creative venues every Saturday, once a month on a Saturday morning. And being exposed to the great Detroit Institute of Art, which has just extraordinary art in it. And another time of going to rehearsal for the Detroit Symphony Orchestra to do a concert that night. But the rehearsal in the morning had this guest conductor who was a man named Arturo Toscanini, who was the great conductor of the 20th century. And just seeing those things were eye-opening for me. Having those experiences that just made the whole thing broader than the life I was living in a blue-collar neighborhood that I was living in. There were other possibilities out there. But the acting thing, I think I described a little earlier that I was mentoring with a filmmaker, who turned out to be Robert Altman, who did M.A.S.H. and several other things. He was one of the iconic filmmakers of the 20th century, and also being able to mentor with a guy named Hal Ashby that held Maud and Being There and Coming Home. And these were iconic directors that I happened to befriend in the early 70s and had the good fortune of learning about filmmaking. In the meantime, I'm making a living as an actor and never fully appreciating it until now. And at this time in my life, I'm looking back and saying, my God, what a life. What a lucky man I've been to be able to stumble into the acting profession and make a living at it, and learning all the time about what it is to move an audience in the dark of a theater and have them leave the theater saying, that was worth the 2 hours I just spent.
Of course, and it's amazing to see how you came from such humble beginnings and then the impact you have had on film and television, whether it's being involved with Alien, which is a huge franchise, being involved with M.A.S.H, being in Top Gun, and of course, the amazing actors and directors and cast and crew that you've been involved in. It's fantastic. I mean, I'd say that you've been living a pretty good life.
I really can't complain about it. It's not always easy. It hasn't been easy. There are the extremes of emotions that those of us in the business experience, from the highs of getting a great job to how am I going to pay the rent, all that stuff that comes with it or has in years past. You get the taste of life that way, of the realities, and you try to bring all the tastes of the things you get out of reality, you bring into your art. That's where it winds up. And by the way, during Turning Point which was a classic ballet film and Steel Magnolias were two other films that I really relished. They had to do with different aspects of our lives, and things that have to do with our lives are really what the storytelling, above all else, is the level of storytelling that seems to have evaporated somewhere. Is one of the things we're missing in the most influential of all media. I don't know if that answers your question or if it was even a question, but...
Absolutely. If anything, you elaborated more on the question, and it actually leads to another one. There is, and you can see in your television and film on your resume that there is so much about storytelling and how that used to be the main focus on the media industry as a whole, where it seems like there's a transition going from storytelling more as focusing on visual effects, but you're starting to see a shift in that. And I really appreciate all the work that you have done and everything that you have been involved with. So you've mentioned some highs and lows. So what would you describe as your most challenging role in your career?
I wouldn't be able to. I have so appreciate that I've been able to make a living, but the most challenging role, I suppose, are those roles that I just am not very good in. And I've done roles where I suddenly realize, oh God, I took this because it was a big money offer, and I just don't know how to do this role. I just don't. And some of them I was not very good. And those are the ones that are challenging, where I'm just thinking, I don't know how to get around this. I'm finding that the filmmaker doesn't really see the larger picture, and I'm lost. I'm lost. There have been a few of those that I haven't really been able to. I don't even remember the films. It's just that you feel, we have to continually check ourselves, not assume we know everything. And I'm still working on that one.
Of course, and when you're working with people that have so many creative differences, is trying to find a happy median to where you can still do your thing as well as listen to the directors and producers on set.
Yeah, well, it's just, in the end, you do your own thing. And I watch other people, so I'm constantly learning from them. I don't feel like I'm being told to do something. I am taking someone's advice or rejecting it based on what I feel is necessary, and it usually works out. But as I say, there are times you're involved in a film that just does not have the elements that really move you to do the inspired performances that seem to happen with good screenplays. But in the end, it's always the screenplay, and it's your fellow actors that you're working with, and certainly the director. The directors don't always connect with the actors in terms of telling them to do this, do that. It's that you have to watch what the director's doing and see what he's doing, because he's the artist that's painting the picture. And you are, as an actor, a part of that photograph, part of that painting. And that's what you have to keep in mind all the time. It's not about our close-ups. It's about how you position yourself, how you affect your other actors, all of that. How you color, help the artist, the painter, the Ridley Scotts, the Tony Scotts, the Hal Ashbys, the different variety of directors around, that you see that work that are inspired, that can give you something as a person, as an individual, and that's how you color the painting of the filmmaker.
That's a wonderful way to describe it.
Yeah. Well, that's the way I see it. The way I see it. I know it's a little unorthodox and perhaps not the way others see it, but it doesn't matter. They all see it when it's all valuable to them, and that's what's valuable to me is the whole thing, is watching a great filmmaker at work.
Absolutely. I mean, that's got to be one of the most rewarding things when you pursue a career in acting. I do have just another question about Alien, and then I have a couple more left for you. There were some scenes from Alien which were completely unscripted. One is the infamous chest bursting scene. Can you discuss one particular scene where you and your fellow actors were completely taken by surprise?
For the most part, it was scripted. It was the reactions are not necessarily scripted. You can't script reactions, an actor's response to what they get. That's what the acting is about the spontaneity and keeping the authenticity of whatever it is you're trying to do alive. And the chest burster, that was in the script, but it wasn't spelled out the way he wrote it. I'll give you that. It was something because, as I said, I was following Ridley around, watching how he was shooting and what he wanted, and getting an idea of how a master works. So when they were setting up the chest burster, I watched how they set it up and knew what was going to happen, saw the way it was going to be implemented. And so I knew, I was watching everything. And that one I knew how it was going to work. But when it worked, none of the actors were aware how this is going to how it's going to manifest. And we were all there, and when that thing came out, the one that was really blown away was Veronica Cartwright she just absolutely had no idea when that happened. And I remember her sliding her back to the wall and her sliding down to the floor with her mouth open. It was quite amazing for all of us. Even if I knew what was going to happen, when it happened, it was something that we all genuinely responded to. We didn't know to what extent this would touch us, because we didn't know to what extent it was going to how it would manifest. We didn't know, and that's the most interesting thing about that, is how you can see something is going to be rigged and put together. It's a metaphor of life. You may plan your life, but how life happens is really quite a surprise.
Absolutely. And that's definitely become one of the most iconic scenes in filmmaking, not only the craft involved for creating it, but just to see the individuals' faces, where, just like you mentioned, yes, you may have known the process involved for making it, but when you see it just in life, you're going to react completely different from the way you thought. And to me, that's one of the best scenes I've ever seen in a movie, period. And that is, huge props to the actors and actresses involved, and plus the director, to be able to create something so memorable that people will be talking about from years to come.
Yeah, it's creativity comes from spontaneity, disciplined spontaneity, and that's really the bottom line. Is we have to have a discipline and we have to have spontaneity, so that the two of them complement one another, and that's when you wind up with your Mona Lisa painting. Or is there another question about what was she smiling at, and we always seem to think we want everything spelled out for us, but we really don't. We need to have our imaginations challenged all the time. And great filmmakers make films that don't give us everything in the dark of a theater the way that special effects do. They've taken away the engagement of our imagination on the best level. And that's a whole other conversation. But, the less is more is what I feel about writing, is you got to just give them all the keys and let the audience get to figure out which door to open with that key,
Of course. Definitely. Now, I know we've talked a lot about Alien, so I'm actually going to switch up one of the questions. I'm a big fan of M.A.S.H, the television series, and with you being involved with the movie, it was definitely a different approach to filmmaking that had been seen previously. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like working with the cast and crew?
On M.A.S.H?
Yes.
On the film, on the movie.
On the film, yeah.
Well, I understand. That was, I had been, as I said earlier, I had been mentoring with Robert Altman prior to doing M.A.S.H, so I had some idea who and what he was and how he could do things. The studio at that time hated the film, the way they were putting it together, the way he was shooting, because he shot it without doing master close-up. His style was the freedom of 2 or 3 cameras shooting and microphones everywhere, and just collect all this stuff, all this product that you had to edit, and put it together in a way that would move an audience. And he kept telling me all the way through the shooting of that movie, the M.A.S.H, because he was also sharing with me at the studio, was trying to fire him and all of this sort of thing, and they weren't going to release the film. And I just, somewhere in the midst of that film, I said, this is an extraordinary experience I'm having here. I'm young to the business, and I'm realizing that I'm in something that is going to be around for a while. It's called a classic film, and that kind of film that you can see 20, 30 years from now and still get from it the same thing from it that you would have received when it was first put out, distributed. And M.A.S.H had that about it right from the beginning. That was, for me, because I had this special relationship with the director, I could see how he would put things together. And most of all, and most importantly, is how you engage your actors and your crew. Everyone has to really feel as though they're a part of the whole. And it is up to a director to be able to conduct that kind of picnic, as it were. We're all out there having our own, bringing in our own potato salad and roasting our own hot dogs and having a good time with each other. And if you have a good time with each other, that we experience with making the movie M.A.S.H, you will have a movie that moves an audience in the right way. And if you touch them the way we did, well, they looked at M.A.S.H and said, those people, they felt that we're having a good time. And they had a good time. So it's like just an extension of the movie is embracing the audience itself. And that's how the audience is were responding to the movie. Which I said was not going to be released by the studio initially, and that's a whole other story.
That's fantastic, because obviously the film had a huge impact, where the television show many, many seasons, if not one of the longest running ever. So it's amazing to see how a film had such a great impact, where it could translate into something that carried on further, and people still talk about the movie to this day and still enjoy watching it, as you said, and that's a huge credit to the actors and directors making such an impact on their work. Speaking of an impact, you've been involved with more than 40 films and 200 television episodes throughout the years. Which characters were your favorite to play?
Well, I sure enjoyed doing Picket Fences, the television series back in the 90s. That was a show that won in 4 years for what it's worth. in 4 years won 16 Emmys, and that was just brilliant writing again. That was just great writing. The writing that we were all proud to be involved in his writing, David Kelly's writing. The crew and the cast, we're all working together on this stuff, you know, and if we're all enjoying what we're doing, an audience, it just is its own reward. And that just extends out further. That becomes award-winning. But I don't know, the favorite characters, I think I love playing that one in particular. There's some other characters that I can't necessarily recall. I'm sure there are a few of them. I don't hang on to that stuff as much as I do what I've learned from them, from what I've done. What I've learned is all that's really important, not my favorites necessarily. Even the bad stuff, bad performances that I've had, which are fair, there's a fair amount from my standpoint, have taught me something. Again, it's that, getting back to that thing I said earlier, that Shakespearean thing of there is no bad or good or right or wrong. Only thinking makes it so. We learn from everything. That's the bottom line. Is we may win or lose. Either way, we learn.
Of course, and that's something that carries on throughout life. It doesn't matter how old or young, you just want to learn and get something as you go through the journey of life. And my last question for you today is there a particular genre of film or television you prefer having acted in after being in so many, such as sci-fi, drama?
Certainly films that tell a story well, that touch us all. And I loved A River Runs Through It, which I don't know if you mentioned that or not, really. A little earlier when you named off all those names. A River Runs Through It was something that moved me, as it did audiences, on many, many levels, about who we are, how we live our lives, how we love those we don't understand and want to understand and never will. And all of those things that are really common everyday things, that kind of films that really turn me on and move me forward, because I also feel that this is the most influential of all media, and we have some obligation to do the best work we possibly can for the audiences out there. It's our duty to do that, and I haven't always been a participant in a film that necessarily was that noble, but I've been in a few that are noble and are moving, and that's what I take away in here, is the nobility of purpose and exercising it as such.
Well, I thank you so much for answering all my questions, and I'm truly grateful to have you on board. So I bet it's back to Ruari with some final closing remarks.
Before we let you go, Tom, we also have a couple of questions from some of our listeners, if that's okay.
Okay.
So, first of all, William Antler, he has a couple of questions. Did you enjoy working with Tom Cruise on Top Gun? Is his first one.
Yes.
And will you be back in Top Gun 2 with the rest of the cast?
I don't have any idea that I will be. I have not heard so. And I'm not assuming it's going to be made. I know they've talked about it, but they've talked about it for 30 years. So until it happens, then I can talk to you about it. I don't know now.
Fair enough. And Chance Bartels would also like to know, do you remember filming the death scene with Pat Hingle on The Fugitive, where his character runs your character over to death?
Not at all. I don't remember doing the show. It's a long time ago.
Yeah, I think that was like 1965 actually, so definitely a long time ago.
No, as I say, I relish the experiences overall. I don't retain specifics of my past. I don't live there. So all of it is just the summation of what I'm talking about now.
Fair enough. Well, I mean, that's the most important thing is that, like you were saying with Ashley earlier, is, you learn from the experiences and you carry them with you, even if you don't remember the specifics. So, that's all of our questions for you today, Tom. It's been a pleasure talking to you on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
All right. Just give me a shout.
We definitely will. Thanks again for joining us, and take care. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Thank you very much. Bye.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye. So, time to wrap up today's show. Make sure to check out our podcast links. Check out our website, website.everythinggeekpodcast.com/egp. Check out our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekpodcast. Check out our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/user/everythinggeekcast. Check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/everythinggeekp. Check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/official everythinggeekpodcast. Check out our Mixcloud profile, www.mixcloud.com/everythinggeekpodcast. Email us at the following email, everythinggeekpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our companion podcast, Everything Geek Comic Cast, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekcomiccast. Make sure to check out the host's YouTube channels. Mine is www.youtube.com/user/Septus Check out Ashley's Instagram, instagram.com/scuba.ash09. Check out Tom Skerritt on Twitter, twitter.com/t/Skerritt, and check out channel 1138 where we broadcast live from, www.channel1138.com. Geeks out, everyone.
Geeks out.
I hitchhiked from Georgia to California when I was 19 years old. I got drunk and ended up in an acting class. I shouldn't say that, but it's true. And then I went back sober the next week to apologize to
the concept of the Purge has caught on so much that Universal was willing to give us such a big movie weekend. So we're excited about the movie, which I think is great.